Assalamu alaikum. How are you?
Wa alaikum salam. Alhamdulillah.
I am so thrilled to have you here today. I'm glad you finally made it here. Let's dive straight into it. What was your life's events that made you the dynamic woman that you are today? And who is Katie Mohamed?
Well, thank you for having me. I think it has been various events and I have a book out that is my memoir that actually showcases everything from the time I was a little girl that made up the person who I am. And I think I've always just never wanted to back down on challenges. I've always wanted to be independent. I wanted to live the big life. And how I got there was not easy. But I think the person who I am today, if I look at myself and, if I talk to a 16-year-old Katie and say that she's going to be okay, I don't think she would believe that she was going to be okay. But looking back now, I think I had myself to always rely on and the Almighty. I always say, I've never wanted to be, my dua always has been, never let me be muhtaj on anyone, because I realized even as children, we were, coming from a family that didn't have money. You ended up being reliant on other people giving you handouts. And what does it do to your self-esteem? So I think for me, it's a series of things. It has been mostly the negative that actually has, the breakdown of marriages, the being a single mom, not being able to afford to study. But for every 5 steps back, it was that 2-step forward and that I kept going. But also I think for me, it was really about the influences that I've had along the way that has made the most impact of the Katie Mohamed that is now here. So Alhamdulillah, it has been a challenging journey, but it hasn't been all bad. It has been some really good stuff that has happened along the way.
Something that you said to me was that the biggest challenge for you was being a single mom. Why is that?
I think it's a pandemic. It's an absolute pandemic. Every time you go, back in the days, it was just, that's how it was. Like, it was an expectation of, if the marriage doesn't work out, then, hey, you take the kids and that's your problem. And whether you take, the father of the child to court or whatever, he just doesn't want to give you the money and that was it. So you as a mother have to constantly step up and make sure that they're okay financially, emotionally. And, I have 2 girls. My eldest daughter is 34 this year, and Humera is, Saif is 34, Humera is 31. But they're sole responsible. I mean, being responsible for 2 humans from the time they are 5 and 7. And I was only, I was 25, 26 at that time. I was a kid. But you don't think about it too much. But then also you think about, why don't you just leave them with their fathers? I mean, we always think about that we have to take the children. I always think to myself is, why don't we just leave them with their fathers? Would they have been any different if the father have the responsibility? Why has it always been the mother? Because what happens over the years as well is that because children don't have either a father figure, you are the mother and father. And it becomes hard because you're not in your masculine energy. You are in your feminine energy. But then you have to be the mother and father to them. And it is so unfair because you're also still focusing on yourself and your growth. And you have these 2 humans that you brought into this world that you have to take care of. And I always think to myself, it was easier, I would think, when maybe 30, 40 years ago. But now it's a pandemic. It is just there. It's just single moms are all there. You're a single parent. So it's you have 2 parents. But the responsibility, the emotional, the financial responsibility becomes the mother's. Whether they eat, whether they go to school, it's your responsibility. And guess what? Islamically, they say that you can go and your father can ask for forgiveness and move on. And it's like so unfair. Because where have they been all this life? So yes, my daughter often says that if she sees her dad, her dad's a stranger. They might share a DNA. But what makes him the father only sharing a DNA? mean, these are like serious things, because being a father means that you've been part of their life, right? Whether you can afford to or not, you have to be part of their lives. So for me, it's that was very difficult, because I wanted him to be part of their life, but he just thought he was going to make my life easier. And again, your ego gets in the way. Well, if I come and take them for a holiday, well, you're going to be out, on your own single. That is the mentality of some men these days. But I find that it's not stopped. That the pandemic of a single motherhood without a choice. And if your husband dies, it's one thing, but it's you have no choice. And you're born with this nurturing thing. And nobody gives you a handbook. If nobody gives you a handbook to say, well, you're a mother, this is how it should be. You are just also making it work. Your mom also just figured it out herself. As much as I had a dad who was home, but he was not present. So my mom also was a single mother her entire life. And it's just I think an unfair. So when people say that, they don't have children, they are childless, and I say, maybe sometimes you're child free. You shouldn't say you're childless. You should say you're child free, because the Almighty didn't want you to have a child. It's okay, because it is really hard to not have a bad day as a mom. Mm-hmm. And I think it's so unfair.
It is unfair. I agree on that one. But with that being said, it's also the most rewarding, I would say, job in the world. No matter what you are, to be a mom, there's nothing more rewarding than that.
I think it's on twofold, because for the rest of your life, you're just responsible for these children, and it's a lot. Because I always think to myself is that, earlier on, we spoke off air, it's like my generation is exhausted. So I don't know if it's rewarding just as a one part, because I always say my generation, the 50 plus generation, is parenting their parents, reparenting themselves, and parenting a future generation. And you ask the Almighty, how can I continue doing this? So I don't know if it's rewarding, if it's just that, but there's the dynamics of it. And then as the matriarchs of our families, there are your siblings that you have to care about. There are your nephews and nieces. So it's not just about your children. It's an extended family. So sometimes you sit back and you're like, if you're giving me all of this, give me the resources, give me the resilience, give me the courage also, because I can't just like, hey, listen, I'm the matriarch of this family. It's not always easy. So I wouldn't say that it's only rewarding. Sometimes there's bitterness, because you are human. I think it's not only rewarding. There is a lot of resentment. There's bitterness that comes with it, because you're like, nobody gave me a handbook to do this. So I won't agree that it's just only rewarding.
Yeah.
There's a lot when you have to do it on your own.
Definitely. And what advice would you give for single moms that are doing it all alone as well?
I think for me, my only advice to single moms is, two advices, is to make sure that you're always financially stable. Make sure that before you step out of that house, that you have your life figured out. Get yourself financially stable in whatever you do, and don't do it on your own. Ask for help, because there's a tribe of people. Because, as women of color, we have this level of guilt and shame where we think, oh, if we ask for help, then we're not doing a good job. No, I wish I could have had that option of asking for help. Yes, my mom helped me out with my kids when I decided to move to Joburg for a year, and I left the kids with my parents. But after that, it was always trying to figure things out yourself. So for me, be financially stable, absolutely, and don't do it on your own. Ask for help. If the father's not there, and if somebody says no, don't take it personally, because somebody else would say yes. So I think you don't have to do it on your own, and there isn't guilt and shame if you do ask. Because what is the worst thing somebody can say? Sorry, I can't do it today, but maybe next week I can do it. So I think we end up trying to do this, and we have a lot of guilt and a lot of shame within our communities. And people talk. That's the thing. We have a community, especially the Muslim community. They're never kind to single mothers. They're never kind to unmarried women. But that's got to stop. We've got to voice that, and we've got to call people out on it as well.
Yeah. You seem to have mastered your unapologetically you in your greatest era. How did you manage to move away from society's expectations of you?
I think I've always been able to speak my truth. My father will tell you, my mother would tell you, from the time I was a little girl, I was always able to speak my truth, and whether it upset somebody else or not. But over the years, I have learned that speaking my truth means that I have to choose the truth as well, because I don't want to hurt people. I don't want to upset people over the years. But it is ingrained in you, but you can learn it. When you start being a voice for others, you have to be unapologetic. You cannot just say, oh, well, this is my problem and I'll deal with it. Your problems are shared problems. I have always loved the media space, and I've always, when I was a little girl, I've always wanted to be on television. I've always wanted to be, a voice out there. It is something that was always attractive for me. And as a woman of color, we didn't have people that looked like us on television. So, of course, it was so, it just looked like something you wanted to do. And, a dear friend of mine, Doreen Morris, who was the first woman of color on television back in the days, I used to look at her and I used to watch her and I was like, she's the first woman of color on television. And, fast forward 30 years later, she knows me by name. She's my friend. So again, I never took no for an answer. I knew sometimes no was either the next opportunity or not now. But it's the resilience that, and also having the audacity to be able to speak your truth. I always got myself into trouble, whether it was school, whether it was parents, whether it was family. Remember when I was 13 years old and I was a young little activist and fighting, the apartheid government. And my mom would just say, people come to visit us. Could you have to speak about apartheid? And she's like, but mom, these people need to know, because again, we are contained in this society where we can't talk about what's going on. And I remember my mom, my grandmother in Urdu at that time, she says to my mom, please just let her leave school because she's going to marry a black man because she's talking about freeing Mandela. That is that is what you grew up with. And you were like embarrassed to actually have your grandmother. So yes, we're supposed to respect our grandmother. But if your grandmother's a racist, how do you respect your thing? So I've always been able to say, it does not matter who you are. I will call you out. And even my mom up to now, I call her out. But I've learned to do it in a more mature way and not in an ugly way, not hurt people. But I do. My mom is 76, 77 years old. Still call out when things that I don't agree with, or the way she, is saying something. So I think over the years you do grow, but you find how your voice is able to move the room, how your voice is able to move people, for you to know that that's a mastery.
Mm-hmm. There's a saying that says, "Speak and be seen." Right? So obviously you have to use your voice to make your mark. For you, you've focused on women empowerment. How do you ensure that it's just not a buzzword that's there and that you're actually adding value to other women?
I think I like to coin the term women advancement, because I think I realize that we all are empowered. It just depends on the challenges that we face. We all are empowered. We all have hands and legs and mouth, and we all are empowered. It's about how do we advance ourselves. A lot of people, when I started, for me, my mom advanced herself. My mom advanced herself being a hawker, selling fruit and vegetables, selling plastics on the side of the road. She knew there was no money. She advanced herself. She didn't wait around people. She didn't have guilt and shame. She needed to feed her children. And I think for me is I look at how she has done that, and I've always been about advancing myself. And if I know that I could go through all the challenges that I faced and I've advanced myself, creating a platform for other women to be able to meet and advance themselves. So yes, when I started W Suite, which is my platform for women advancement, and people were like, "Oh, why would you need another one? There's so many." I'm like, if it's going to take 175 years for women to have equal pay, you will need 175 million more platforms to create. So every community is different, and it's never a buzzword. We all are trying our best to create the platforms. People that don't want you to succeed will say it as a buzzword. But we are creating the platforms. Everybody is trying to create a platform, whether it's 10 women, 100 women. They're trying to create platforms for women to come meet, to talk, collaborate, connect with each other. So for me, I always have the utmost respect for every platform that's created for women to get together. And it can only be a buzzword if people see it with envy and jealousy. Because I always say, when people say, it would be, why don't you do it? So it can only be a buzzword if I'm not doing it, right? But you can do it as well, so can I. Because we have different networks, we have different things. So I also look at it that people are very easy judgy, and people do look at with it as why her, not me. But hey, you can call me, ask me how I did it. I'll tell you. So it's never a buzzword. It's a buzzword if you look at it with envy and jealousy.
And what would you say was the gaps in society that pushed you towards women and
advancement? In 2018, I work a lot within the government space, and I was working with the presidency on the investment summit. Cyril Ramaphosa at that time was the acting president, and he needed to create a platform where the world comes to South Africa and believes that they need to invest in jobs, money, in whichever way. And he created this platform called the South African Investment Summit. It was in 2018. And I, again, was fortunate enough to be there. And I looked around the room. I mean, it was maybe 1,000 people. And I felt like I was at the Oscars, because there were the chairman of BMW from Germany that was down, the head of Unilever, everybody, presidents, ministers, corporate. And I looked around, and it was lily white male. The people of color, I knew them all by name. The women that were there, I knew them all by name. And they were all 60 plus. And I'm like, where is the women? Where are the younger women that might not be the Wendy Lohabas, the Gloria Sorobes, that got the opportunities to be top dogs at that time, 30 odd years ago? They are there. They are in corporate, they are as entrepreneurs, but they don't get the opportunities because they either have to hide behind, I am the HR director, or I am this, or I am that. And I looked around and I left, and I said, of the 1,000 people, 600 were white. Of the 400, maybe 150 were women. And I knew all of them, but most of them were over 60. Dr. Naledi Pandor, and, all the ministers, and I looked at it, and it was Nikki Newton-King. They were all ready to retire. There's no succession plan for women. So I was like, how do I, as Katie Mohamed, who has access to people, create these platforms where women can come together to either meet people of influence and find opportunities for there. So for me, a lot of people's like, what is your impact? People always are so harsh on you. I always say is, you have to think about it as the teacher opens the door and the student walks in. It's an old African proverb. So I would open the door. You walk in and you do what you need to do. It's not like I've got to go and say, oh, Amanda is not networking properly. No, you're not 5 years old. You're not 10. I'm not your mother. I'm creating these platforms. I'm bringing high-powered women for you to be able to have your 30-second pitch or your 2-minute pitch in order to think. And alhamdulillah, it has been, it's a legacy for me now. And people often say to me, which for me, that's my impact, is, oh, I've met so-and-so at your event. I've met this person at your event. I look there and it's like, well, that's my job. If I've created an impact of one person or 10 women, I've done a good job. So yes, that's what I can say about the ability to use your influence to move the needle for other women.
Mm-hmm. At what point did you feel the courage or the need to write your own story?
When I turned 50, and I was in the lockdown, and at 50, and I remember, you would think that it's a milestone, right? You're like, oh, I'm halfway to the rest of my life, and you are like alone, and like your children just come, here is the cake from Willie's, and this and that, the other. So that, because the year before, I had lost my sister-in-law in a tragic car accident on my birthday. And that was in 2019. And in 2020, I turned 50. And my birthday would never be the same. So I only had one sister-in-law, and she was the only one that would phone me after Fijr to wish me happy birthday, remind everybody that it's our birthday. And I remember when she passed away, when I was the first person that got the call, that said that, Halima passed away in a car accident. And I was busy preparing for my birthday lunch the next day. And the next day, people were wishing me happy birthday. And the ones that knew me were condolences. And immediately it is a conversation about mortality, life and death. It's just like there. And I looked at it the year after that when I turned 50, all alone, having a birthday. The kids were there, and my sibling, my sister came, and we all had like a video call and stuff. And you're like, Halima's not here. Life is so fragile. What is my legacy that I'd like to write about? But it was what is a story I'd like about? So it wasn't a memoir. It was like, what is the story I'd like to leave behind? And then I went and I did a writing course in the lockdown. And I remember the publisher at that time, who's a very well-known publisher, and she knows me from a media space for about 15 years. And she's like, but Katie Mohamed, nobody knows you. Everybody just knows you on this red carpet and, from the social scene. Nobody knows your story. And you're such a good storyteller. And I didn't know that of myself. And that's when I started writing. But you would see that my writing before I had COVID and after I had COVID is too different. Before I had COVID, it was a little bit more arrogant. It was more entitled. It was all of that. And then the year after that, I was in ICU with COVID and, lost 10 days of my life. Came out of there, had to teach myself to walk and talk and type. And you like, what is it humbles you. And then I started, penning this person that I was like, I've come so far, and I'd really like to tell my story and about how it is, how we can be courageous and how we can have purpose, because that's, the challenges that you face and the horrific events in your life make you or force you to realize how fortunate that you are. You don't have to have a Lamborghini and a Maserati. Fortune is, that you're getting up every day and you're breathing and all of that. And for me, it was, what is my purpose? What has been my purpose? Have I lived a purposeful life? How courageous have I been? And what is the wisdom that I have learned from other people? Because life, you can't do it on your own. And what is the wisdom that I'd like to impart to other people? So that is how the memoir came up.
Would you say that every person's story matters and can change the world, maybe?
every person's stories. Everybody has a story to tell.
Yes.
And I think we try to pretend we try to tell stories only the positive. We want to say only the good things, because even like aesthetically, we want to look good, right? We don't want to be seen without makeup and all of this. But as you get older, you're like, screw this. I just take me with my pigmentation and all of that. But I mean, it takes a lot of courage to actually get to that, right? So for me, it was really about being true to myself and how authentic I could be with my story. So you will see that the story, people were like, oh my God, you said this about yourself. You said that you were a narcissist at one time in your life. And I was like, you said that you were egotistical at one time. You said this. And I was like, but my story would not be true if I just had unicorns and balloons and rainbows. It would not change anybody's life. So I always say to people that need to write their story, go dig in deep. I talk about, sexual abuse when I was young. Yes, people of color don't want to talk about that. You got to go dig in deep and tell your hard truths, because that's being authentic. That's who you are. So everyone has a story to tell, only if they are able to dig very deep and tell their truth, whether people like it or not.
And what was the hardest truth for you to tell in the book?
It was my dad's drug addiction and suicide. I think it was, my dad's not alive. My dad attempted suicide when I was 17 years old, and he drank pool acid, and his life was never the same again. And just the mere fact that I realized as I got older that we came from a broken home, but I loved my dad. Nobody understood the love that I had for him. My mom did not understand that, but he was so spiritual in his flawedness. I call him the misunderstood wisdom teacher. But I learned so much from him about history and Islam without it being the way it's supposed to be. He made it seem, he romanticized it. When he spoke about marriages, it was about the romance part of it. It was, when you spoke about the war, it was about the intention, the purpose of the war. So my dad spoke to me about Constantinople, Marco Polo. So for me, writing about him, because I remember, when he was in Sakrat and he was, about to go, and he was like, would you ever write a book? And at that time I was like, why would I write a book about you? And he has a thread in my book, and he is there. So for me, it was hard, but I wish that he would be able to see how I have honored him. And even though you can be a flawed human being, you can change somebody's life in your flawedness. And that's why when my brother read the book, he's like, you had a different relationship with Papa than we did. And I said, because maybe I gave him an opportunity. And he was never okay. He was never a great character. But they were, as I always say, he and I were twin flames. And so it's not only good people that influence you, it's people that had challenges that influence you as well. And don't give up on people. My mother will tell you, I never gave up on my dad. She would say, and I moved to Joburg, and she would call and complain about him. And she's like, I don't know why I'm complaining to you, because you'd always take his part. Because I would go and say, what did you say? What, how? It's that. Never give up on people that are flawed.
That sounds so inspirational, that you would actually share every depth of your story. I'm sure it would make a difference to many people.
And a lot of people that have read my memoir have said that they've read it twice. First, with my voice. Second, how could I learn from it? And that for me makes me believe that my job is done telling my story, because it is changing lives. I talk about identity a lot in my book. I mean, it's one of the biggest chapters. And as women of color, as Muslim women in South Africa, I write about how do we discover our identity. And I think just being born within an apartheid regime, being in a country that if you're African, I mean, if you go around the world and you tell them I'm African, they look at you and they're like, oh, really? Because African has a certain look, right? And we are born in apartheid. Then we had to deal with with racism. Then as a Muslim girl that is dark skinned, you have to deal with colorism. Then you have no money, you have to deal with classism. And then it's like all these isms that become part of this, and you're like, who are you? And then, my name is Khadija, right? And even they could not even spell my name wrong. I was having a fight with my dad once. It's like, my name is not meant to be spelled like this. TH is not it's not supposed to be spelled. And he was like, yeah, but in the apartheid government, you just walk away when they spell the name and you walk away. But that, you've taken my identity from me by spelling my name incorrectly. So for me, identity, race, I speak about, that's a huge, huge part of me. And why I call myself Katie. And I always say it doesn't matter what people call you. It doesn't take away the person who you are. So I've become so fluid. So Katie Mohamed is a stage name. It has been a name that Mohammed is not even my dad's surname. Osman is my dad's surname, Osman Sayed. And my husband's name was Mohammed. And at that time, nobody even told us you don't have to change your surname. My dad didn't want me to change my surname, but at that time, my husband wanted me to change my surname. But I should have listened to my dad, because my dad always says, you don't take your identity away from your father's surname, because you are the daughter of, right? And then, of course, let's be honest, your surname changes a couple of times. And then if you get married more than once, then your surname changes. So what happened was, Mohammed was my surname at that time. Katie became a Western world, a democratic name that people started calling me. And then when I started, having a radio show, and, people started calling me Katie Mohamed, and then it just became a brand name. And then I always say, well, people are like, oh, but why don't you go back? No. People that love and care about me call me Khadija. My black friends call me Ketiwe. That's the name they coined me. And Katie Mohamed is a brand name, and it still doesn't take away who I am. And it's stuck. And I was like, you don't question Lady Gaga or Madonna. So I am. So identity is a big part of the book. And when you read it as well, you would question your identity, how things looked for you as you were growing up. When people say, go back to where you came from, and you're like, where do I go? I was born in this country. I am as African as I can be. I have all these layers of me. When I go to India, I don't even like to go to India, because I don't want to be known as an Indian, because these days, being in India, they're the biggest Islamophobics in the world, right? So I don't want to be associated with that Indianness. My dad did not grow us up culturally. He grew us up Islamically. And that is the difference. So people sometimes say to me, oh, but why do you, hide being? No, my dad grew me up Islamically. Culture and religion are two different. Culture is man-made. Religion is from the, and that is my dad. So I didn't grow up listening to Indian music. I didn't grow up doing all the Indian traditions and whatever. So we were the kids that were the outcasts in the family. But my dad was very clear. I want to grow up my children as humans and with their religion. So when people were like, "Are you ashamed to be an Indian?" Yes, I am. Because if you look at it today, being an Indian, you are Islamophobic. Being an Indian communities do not, they are racist. They are about classism. They're about colorism. You've got to be a certain, light skin to be able to say, "Oh, she's pretty." I grew up with people in my family, aunties and stuff, and saying, "Even though you're dark, you're so beautiful." I never understood that. I go to my dad and I say to Papa, they say this. He said, "You are my Miss Universe." How dare you say that to a 10-year-old child? And you know what? That is why I always say to myself, people say to me, you don't have many Indian friends. It's like, I don't want them, because up until you can come and tell me that you're a decent human being, I will adopt you. But further to that, I want to have friends that I literally do not see color. They do not see me as I am not good enough because of the color of my skin. So yes, I have often said, proudly said, I keep a very low Indian connect, and people often come to me and say, how is it that you should have so much black friends? And I was like, you know what? They don't make me feel less than.
Mm. So the media world sees you as a bold, outspoken woman, but you describe yourself as a simple young girl, So what would you say that your difficult childhood contributed to who you are? And how is it that you've remained simple now?
I think, of course, social media will say I'm not simple because of the way you look and the way you are. I'm a village girl. I'm still traditional. I am, dal and rice is still my favorite. Curry khichdi is still my favorite. Those are the things I would probably choose when I even go to an Indian restaurant. For me, coming from a little village, coming from the wrong side of town, gave me the resilience and the courage to live my dreams. And I think when you have nothing, and when you dream, when you come from a small town, and when you come from a town that, you have kitchen neighbors, and your kitchen neighbors are not Muslim, they're either Khalid or they're Hindu or they're black. And then you grow up in that society where everybody is equal. So for me, the contrary to what the media thinks of me, but I think people that know they know me, that putting on a beautiful dress and putting on makeup and having my hair done up does not take away from who I am, and they know that very well as well. And I think people that know me. People that don't will, of course. Somebody did a focus group on me once, and they asked people that read my book, people that follow me on social media, what they think about me. And it all was like, oh my God, she's always so put together. Oh my God, I'll be too afraid to speak to her. And she's always inspiring. It was not negative, but what I know what I put out there is that I will always show up as my best self. And at my best self is putting on a pretty dress, some makeup. Doesn't take away who I am. Mm. I was doing that when I was 5 years old, my mom would say. So it doesn't take away who I am.
Yes. And what was the moment of betrayal and hurt that impacted your path to where you are now?
I think my first betrayal was when I was sexually molested, and I must have been between 10 and 13, between those years. That was betrayal, because that was the one where people, your uncle, is supposed to take care of you, right? And they didn't. And I think that was the first layer of betrayal. And I think sometimes that's why I also have issues with men in my life, is that the recurring betrayal, like my dad's betrayal of committing suicide, of attempting the suicide, and me being involved in a gender-based violence relationship, that constant betrayal literally made me so strong. And I think I felt that I've taken away from that I could, stab a person that comes at me this time, because that's the kind of person. So betrayal for me has multiplied in various ways, in male relationships, in business. I don't think I've ever been betrayed in friendships. And I think that's what I hold dearly. But in business, but I think it's also about the person I am, because I can foresee things. I am an empath, and I do feel a lot. But as I grow older, I feel that I'm able to see things not through rose-colored glasses. So I'm able to manage betrayal. But I also look at betrayal as I got older, is that it's not about me, it's about them. And they're the ones that need to put their heads on the pillow. And they're the ones that need to answer to their creator, not me. So I think for me, I found solace in knowing that even if people do betray you, my ego comes out and say, oh, well, how could you do this to me? But at the end of the day, they have their day where they will meet their creator. And I think it gives me a kind of solace in that way.
I'm so sorry. Your childhood sounds tragic, and I can't imagine the pain and the hurt that comes with that. What advice would you give younger girls that may be experiencing the same thing?
Talk to people about it. Don't ever let it go. Talk to people that will believe you, because again, I know that, the communities don't, it's like, they try to protect the abuser. They try to protect the perpetrator because, oh God, what would people say? That was it. That's how it is. But speak to people. The most important thing is my mom believed me, but it was like 10 years later. But, that happened. But I wish I was able to speak to people about it, or speak to someone that believed me at that time. But the most important thing about, it's an actual disease now. If you are not able to speak to an adult or a friend or a teacher, if you try with your mother and your mother doesn't believe you, don't stop there. Because again, we go, oh, it's my mother. No, don't stop there. And go and report them to police. Go report them to we have a great constitution in this country that protects, children. Go and lay a charge. Social media, tweet, talk about it. Don't worry about protecting them. Protect yourself, most importantly.
So as a little girl, you always had big dreams and hopes. How did you know you were destined for more?
I think just believe in myself. I think when you can only believe if you're destined for greatness, if you believe in yourself. And you can't expect your parents to believe in you. You can't expect your family to believe in you. You believe in yourself. And then you tell people how they should believe in you. And that's how that works out, as you go along. I had great teachers and also, when you know that you're destined for greatness, is you have to be an atmosphere changer. You have to change the atmosphere so people see you. And we spoke about, being seen. You can't make a difference. You can't make any difference in the world if you are just a flower behind the couch. No. So be loud, be bold, be brave. And I think for me, it just, I knew that as a 10-year-old girl, walking around selling papad in a community for my own, for money for home. I often ask my mom, how did you let the 10-year-old go from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. and not have, contact? Yeah, but it was safer then. Not really, actually, and I guess now I call up my mom, when I say to her, and she would say, oh, but we gave you food, a roof over your head. And I was like, but that's my human right. That is a human right. You can't negotiate and barter to say as a parent, you gave us a bed and a shelter and food. No, that's my human right. I think if we are able to articulate all of that, you are able to say that you are bigger than this. You're bigger than poverty. You're bigger than your little village there. You have to believe in yourself. And you can only believe that you are destined for greatness if you believe that you can do it.
And winning awards, what did that do for you?
I think winning awards is really, it's a boost to your ego. It really doesn't take away anything from you. But it's also validation, because validation is always external, right? It's always like people recognize you. And that for me is when people recognize you. But it doesn't mean that if you don't win awards that you are not great at what you do. It just, that's how it is. Over the years, you win awards and, it's a thing. But these days you can buy awards. So really, it doesn't really mean much. So don't hold on to, back in the days when we were winning awards, it was great. People recognized how good we were. And now it's like, hey, if you have a great following, or if you pay for an award and you get an award, doesn't really mean much. Your award should be yourself. And I think that's the most important thing.
Let's look at your podcast. What was some of the reasons to create it, and what are current topics that are kind of trending for you?
So Lynn Forbes and I, we spend a lot of time together just talking about, navigating midlife, and how, 50 plus is, has come, and it just slaps us into our reality, right? And I remember, telling her one day, is like, we have such wisdom, and we have the audacity to say how we feel about things. Yeah. And, let's talk about it on air. And so, of course, the podcast is called Outspoken Owls. And it's really about how we are outspoken. We all have our opinions. And owls is, when you get older, you barely sleep, right? So Outspoken Owls came up, and it was really about, first of all, as women, because we can talk about women, and how it's different when you talk about navigating midlife. But when you talk about midlife crisis, it seems that men have the crisis, not women, because we go into a transition. Men either have a younger women, they buy cars, they have a crisis because they don't know what they are. We become more responsible as women. So for me, it was midlife transition. And how do we transition? We start wanting to do more purposeful work. We start wanting to volunteer. We start wanting to make the world a better place. We start wanting to be good grandmothers. If we didn't do a good enough job as mothers, we're like, okay, well, maybe as grandmothers, we can do a better job. And then how we become responsible with our health, the way we look, the way we dress. So the content of the conversation is, it's really about age is inevitable. We talk about, do we dress our age? Do we have to dress our age? And how people are very judgmental on women that are much older. It's like we are has-beens. I was saying this early on. Was it yesterday? And I was having a conversation with some media people, and I was saying to them is that the current South Africa and Africa is obsessed with the youth. What happens to us? I mean, we have so much going for us that we can actually teach. I mean, that's why I sit on a board with the youth board, and they call me a elder millennial because that's who they see me. So we can offer a lot. So I think through the podcast, we really talk about menopause, and how we just heard our parents have hot flushes, whatever. But menopause, there's a perimenopause first, then there's a menopause. You don't just get into menopause, but what happens to you? Because you change as a person. You don't just change with your body. There's a whole lot of things that go through, and that's why when women that are married that don't have sex with their husbands, and they're going to have a younger wife or younger things, because you're going through all of this, and then it's the weight gain, and it's the whole lot of things you don't know why you came into the kitchen, you can't remember. So we really speak about what our experiences, and both of us are single, and we speak about how do we date at our age? I mean, like, I don't want to date an older man, right? And she was like, well, she'd date I was like, no, I don't want to date an older man. He has to be younger because my energy is younger. I'm youthful. So she's like, but how do you navigate that? Because then somebody sees you as a sugar mommy. And I'm like, okay, well, then that's the challenges. So we really are very open about the conversations we have as women, what we go through. And we speak about how we handle things. How do we handle grief? How do we handle loss? How do we handle love? How do we, how do we make decisions? And what have we not done yet that we want to do? So it's kind of like a eat, pray, love podcast.
It sounds like a feel-good session.
Yeah. Well, we do. We have, we also talk about some really hard stuff, one of the topics we talk about is entanglement. Were you involved in an entanglement? Was I involved? And then it's like, oh my God, yes, we all sometimes get involved in an entanglement. You don't even know you're in an entanglement, right? And so it is very interesting. And people, the one favorite one that people like is have you ever, or never have you ever. and people come at you and they were like, because you're honest, right?
Yes.
And whoever's watching it is going to listen to your honesty. So I mean, it's really about navigating midlife, and through that, what are your learnings? What are your opportunities? What are your challenges? Because you're not dead.
Yes.
You're halfway through the rest of your life. I always say is that I am in my second act now. And what does my second act look like? And you also, when you're, navigating your midlife, you have the audacity to speak your mind. You can be unapologetic about things. And nobody can actually come after you. So so I think it's really good, and people enjoy it. People laugh, people cry with us.
Yeah.
But we have a good time having authentic conversations.
So do you see yourself getting married?
I think I never did for a while. But 2025, I thought, well, this is the year I should. But then I thought, like, what does the pool look like? Because I think the pool looks like it has a lot of cracks out there. But then also you think about now you you have all these characters that you've built up in yourself. You have to have somebody that is not intimidated by this in order for you to have this relationship. And somebody was like, well, you can be Katie to the world, but you Khadija to me. And I think it might be difficult, but I am very much open to but I have a type. So that's the other challenge. I have a very specific type. So it's a challenge.
Well, I wish you all the best.
Thank you. I need it.
So from a professional point of view and a personal point of view, from your experience, what words of wisdom would you leave us with today?
Live your life with authenticity, intent, and purpose, and then you will know your greatness. Because if you know that you are as genuine as you can be and as authentic as you need to be, if you know what your intention is, every single day you get up, what is your intention? What do you want to today? What legacy do you want to leave? And what is your purpose? Why did the Almighty send you here? We are not all here to just get up, work, eat, take care of our families. No, we have a bigger purpose. And when you find that purpose, you actually, somebody said to me today about, there was a guy from Amsterdam I was online with, and he said something about, I just spoke about how Donald Trump has taken away funding from Africa and whatever. And he's like, I live in the Netherlands. People don't need anything. And I said, I would be so sad to live in the Netherlands because I want to be in a continent where people need me, because that's where I get my blessings from. Because imagine if there's no poverty, there's no challenges in the world, there's no war. How would we get blessed? How would we? I was like, no, I would love to be in this continent with all the challenges because I can make a difference, and that blessing I will get. And he was like, I didn't think of it like that. And I said, well, that is when you realize that your purpose is, and having a level of consciousness is so important.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. You are truly brave. I can't wait to read the book, and I wish you all the best with your next project. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.